This is, I guess we call it the Belongfulness program. Uh, Thank you so much for joining. It's great to have you here.
Absolutely. I'm really glad. I'm really glad we met. Really glad we got this set up. I'm really excited for it.
Yeah. So, just for everybody's edification, a few weeks back, Lenny and I met at got to be one of the coolest programs, maybe the coolest program in all of New York City, Creative Mornings. Once a month. This was in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, run by the inimitable Tina Roth Eisenberg, and just an amazing event. We learned about storytelling, met some really cool people, and Lenny and I got a chance to chat a little bit, and I learned a little bit about what a program that you're working on, which is what we're going to talk about. And one thing led to another. Now we're here.
Absolutely. I love how the Venn diagrams of New York City kind of overlap, and having us be able to meet at that place was really nice. So I'm really excited to chat with you about this. This is a really cool talk.
How did you first find out about Creative Mornings?
Yeah. So it's got to be like 6 years ago now. So I've been going for quite a long time. Uh, Essentially, I've quit my like 9 to 5 job twice now. Like in my career, I've had little bit gaps, and the first time I quit was coming out of an ad tech company, ad tech startup. And when I was about to quit, I told my one of the managers on our team, like, "Hey, I'm going to take some time off, working on some passion projects and all that." And she said that there was this program that she used to go to called Creative Mornings, that she absolutely loved, and because I would have less structure in my life, she said this would kind of add a little bit of structure, inspiration, and that kind of thing that I probably wouldn't have out of like a traditional environment. So I went once and I fell in love with it, and I've been going literally ever since. So it's like almost 6 years ago now. Through the pandemic, went through some of their virtual events too, but I'm really glad that it's back in person now, and I think it's been hopefully one of the things I can keep doing.
Yeah, I imagine in that span of time that the idea of meeting somebody and kind of hopping on a podcast interview a couple weeks later is not an unusual outcome from an event like that.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think it's just everyone there is so like, how do you say it? They're so down to support each other's creative activities and creative endeavors. So I think that just kind of environment really perpetuates into people you meet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. The culture really that event in particular, I mean, I hadn't been to one maybe since last year, and I walk in and they hand you like a little brochure that's like about what do you treasure, and it had these like interactive activities where you had to meet a stranger and then draw a portrait of them with your offhand, and ask them what they treasured, and that was an incredibly vulnerable kind of provocation for people, but I feel like it kind of helped loosen us up, and they just do so many fun things like that with those programs.
Absolutely. Hopefully keep on
So
moving forward. Yeah.
yeah, so all right, so talk to me about dumplings.
I could talk all day about them. What would you like to know about dumplings?
Where do we even start? Tell me about
They're
dumplings.
delicious. No.
Yeah, they're delicious. It's absolutely true. Uh, what about your relationship to them growing up?
Yeah. So growing up, my family's from Hong Kong. I grew up in the U.S. though, but growing up, obviously, when I ate at home, it was always home cooked meals and a lot of things like comfort food and things like that. Dumplings were part of it, and I guess for me, growing up, like I never learned to make them. Right, I would be being a little brat, like playing video games or watching TV or something, watching like Dragon Ball Z or something like that. I don't know. And my family, my grandma specifically, would be cooking for us. And it wasn't until like college where I started wanting to learn and wanting to cook and wanting to be a little bit more involved in that aspect. So dumplings was always a thing that I remember from growing up. Like, oh, I really love these, and my family made them and all that. And I just started hosting dumpling makings at college for just my friends or my fraternity or whatever. I would just kind of hang out, make dumplings, and a few of the people there that were who were Chinese or at least like grew up eating or making dumplings we'd all get together and show folks how to do it. And it was just like a fun little time that we did. So I guess growing up, it was just like a thing I ate, not a thing I did. Right.
Yeah, yeah. And then there was this moment in college when something kind of switched over, where you got more kind of interested in being engaged in it and involving other people in it.
Yeah, I think so. I grew up in Pittsburgh, like a small like suburb outside of Pittsburgh, and I would say I was probably one of only like five people of color, or like just like a handful of people of color in my whole like school district, right?
Mm,
So I didn't really kind of embrace my Chinese side and my kind of culture and everything. It was always stuff that we did at home, but I never kind of brought it out with me.
hmm
Um, in college, I went to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh as well. Just being exposed to that, like coming from that environment of my small little suburban town to Carnegie Mellon, where it was just like a global, like mass of people thrown together,
hmm
really was like, oh, other people are Chinese and have this kind of like Chinese background that they all love doing this thing. I joined some cultural organizations. I joined things that like I didn't really know about because I was just like, I grew up in a town that we loved Pittsburgh Steelers. We loved going to the mall and going to Hot Topic and like all these other things. There wasn't really much of like an Asian community around where I grew up. So then
Mm.
CMU was really one of the first places that I was like, oh, this is cool. I can like kind of start embracing a little bit. Met some people who were down for that, and we just started doing it for some of our friends just because we wanted to learn and we wanted to share.
So was there like a conversation or an event or like a moment when that kind of switched over for you? Like clearly just being in that environment was important, but was there kind of a moment you recall when you said like, "Oh, I'm going to I'm going to start taking action in this direction."
I think it was probably around some of the holidays, like so those
Mm.
major Chinese holidays. So I think I remember we would always do it around Lunar New Year. So then that was just like a few of like the folks in our fraternity that would celebrate it. We'd be like, "Oh, it's Lunar New Year! Like, what are y'all doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know. We should like make some dumplings or something." And then we just kind of went through it. So it was more like a spark from like a cultural thing that was like, "Hey, this is something that you should be doing because it's something that your culture celebrates." And like a lot of people
Yeah.
were in that kind of I guess, environment. We're like, yeah, let's try it. Why not? So I don't think I remember like a one specific incident, but it was more so just like these are kind of the cultural things that I never celebrated outwardly. It was always just kind of with my family, and then this is
Yeah.
like, yeah, let's do it.
Well, no, but I think that's huge that the holiday acted as a prompt
Hmm.
for reflecting on, hey, this holiday's coming up. It's a date on the calendar. It happens every year, and it invites you to say, what if anything will I do to acknowledge and take advantage of the fact that this holiday is happening, and that combined with your college experience seemed to put you in a place where you did take action to everyone's delicious benefit.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's been iterations of our dumplings with a bunch of our because we did it for our fraternity. Everyone from their different backgrounds came, and one of
Mm.
my friends was like, I'm not like learning how to do this, like, or he was having trouble learning how to fold it. So he's like, I'm just gonna make ravioli because he was Italian. So he started
Yeah.
making, like dumpling filling, but making like a ravioli fold, and I'm like, yeah, it's awesome. Like it's just delicious stuff wrapped inside of a carb. Like every culture
Yeah.
does that.
Chinese Italian fusion in progress.
Absolutely.
So everyone was not just eating these dumplings; they were learning as well.
Yeah, so that's what we tried to do. People just came in. We were just sitting in like our like big like our dining hall area, not hall. I guess it was like a room, like dining room area, and we would just be having like this assembly line of dumpling making. So everyone that came by, they'd be like, "Oh, I want to. Like, what are you doing?" And then we tell them, and then they come in and make it, and then we cook it in the kitchen.
That's amazing. And so people were learning about the actual process of how to make them.
Hmm.
Did you have any other kind of facilitated conversation, or did you kind of explain the background of it, or anything like that at the
Not
time?
as much. I don't think I was as thoughtful behind it. I was just like, it's a food thing that brings people together,
Yeah.
and we're all learning how to make it because it sounds like it's a fun thing. That didn't really come probably until after I graduated. Kind of like
Right.
more thoughtfulness behind what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, what it celebrates, what it means, like the symbolism to our culture, like that kind of thing. Really
Yeah.
probably didn't come until probably like 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe like I've been in New York for about 10 years now, so it's
Yeah.
thing that I've kind of learned to embrace more and more, especially then the jump from college to New York was like another level of like embracing my culture, embracing my background and everything.
Yeah, and I like that. I feel like one of the solutions or one of the things that really helps is just people just doing stuff, not overthinking it, not like branding it or it's just, hey, I like this, let's do it, and
Mhm.
we don't need to formalize it too much. But you did mention that so post college coming to New York, um, your more recent endeavors are a little bit more maybe informed by some of these intentions. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this comes through my, I guess, like affinity of Chinatown. I just love Chinatown. It's like my second home to me. And I always go, I always explore food there. There's a lot of comfort things for me. A lot of Chinatowns, like the history of Chinatowns in the US, a lot of them are Cantonese because a lot of people came from Hong Kong or Guangzhou, which are the like harbor cities in China. So it was easier for them to emigrate over here. So a lot of these Chinatowns are, I guess, like my background. Um, so I really like, I can speak the language, the food's familiar to me and all that. But as I kind of started going more and more, I started finding out more and more about these organizations that support Chinatown. And I think a lot of them came out because of the pandemic, actually, because of a lot of things that are happening to Chinatown store owners, because of the violence that was happening to the Asian community there. A lot of things started popping up of people being supportive and also celebrating and kind of like lifting up like the Chinese and I guess the Asian population as a whole in Chinatown, because it's not just Chinese down there. There's so many
Mhm.
different Asian population diasporas down there, and they're all
Mhm.
kind of like getting lumped into like the China flu or whatever it is, right? It's this thing that kind of kept perpetuating, and from that, I learned so much about like my culture because of these organizations that I started joining, because of these people I started like meeting, and that really helped inform a lot of like I want to celebrate this more and more. I'm like I think I used to be Chinese and I was like Chinese American and all that, and I was like that was just cool, but for now, I'm like proud and like I want to not even just like I'm yeah hell yeah I'm Chinese. Like I want to celebrate that and I want to share that with people now. I think that's like the evolution that I've come to be over the last like few years of my life, and that's where I kind of started off these things, this dumpling making like side business I'm doing, a few of these other things I'm going on. That for me, it's about I'm celebrating my culture because I love it, but I want to bring people in. I think that's like the next step is like make sure that even if you're not Chinese, even if you're not Asian, whatever, like this is why I love it. Like I think you should love it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the issues around um hatred, controversy, violence, like these things that are happening, so much of it can is I think related to the fact that people just don't have any connection to it or exposure to it, that like somebody hears the word China and it's like this political boogeyman word that's used to and it's like, well, but I also know Lenny, and Lenny's awesome, and I love dumplings, and I know why dumplings are more than just a food, but really an important part of the Chinese culture. I feel
Mhm,
like being exposed to more of that would erode some of that distance
mhm.
between cultures, which I think is so useful, so important. So
Yeah.
you've been doing these in person gatherings in New York.
Yeah. So it started off before the pandemic, actually. So my little side business, side hustle, whatever you want to call it, I actually have no idea. I called it Dumpling Dude. It was essentially I created it as a way of using dumpling making to as team building events. Essentially, bringing either companies or nonprofits or community organizations, whatever, right? Bring people together, and I teach them how to make dumplings, Chinese style dumplings, because that's my background. I have pork and chive, which is like my family's like the classic Chinese recipe. You have like the vegetarian one for people who are not eating meat. I have like a shrimp and like chili crisp one. So it's kind of just taking people through all the steps of dumpling making, but bringing together a group of people that are connected but want to get connected even further, right? And using dumpling
Mm.
making as like the vehicle for that. So I did it prior to the pandemic. I had a few in person. I was very lucky that a friend of the partner of one of my friends, he owned a studio space in Williamsburg that he lent me. We actually like we talked and we like really hit it off. he lent me a space to host these events. It had a full-on kitchen. It had a full open dining top area for people to prep stuff. There was a really beautiful dining table and everything for people to eat and to wrap and eat in. Um, but when the pandemic hit, everything shifted to virtual, and we saw like everyone was doing cooking classes. That be through, I guess, word of mouth of a lot of my friends and colleagues or network or whatever. Companies started bringing me in to do virtual dumpling makings because it was one of the easiest, but also I think like most fun ways for people to like Zoom stay in touch. So that kind of I had a lot of events, especially through Lunar New Year. I did API Heritage Month and midsummer or Mid Autumn Festival through like the major kind of like Asian celebration times. The uptick in like the company saying, "Hey, we have an Asian ERG." My friend was like, "I have a friend in that ERG or whatever." They would bring me in and I'd host a class. Since the pandemic has kind of shifted into this new phase where people are kind of doing hybrid or back to work, that has fallen off. The virtual thing, people don't really want to do virtual events as much anymore. And unfortunately, I lost my space because the friend, he sold the space, so he's no longer has
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
So I'm just kind of trying to figure out this next evolution, which I actually have created a party full already, and I'm about to start advertising for it, which is actually lucky that this is here. The thing I call Dumpling Discussions, where I use dumpling making as a way for people to talk about topics that I think are important. Things like, what does success mean to you, or mental health, or the Asian American experience, stuff like that. I want to use dumpling making as these kind of like mini get-togethers for people to talk and kind of go through these kind of topics that are maybe a little harder to breach. But if you have like a plate full of dumplings in front of you, maybe it's easier. I don't know.
Yeah, it's amazing how I think it's a really great way of approaching that because people often resist the thing that they need most if you come straight at them with it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you said like let's get together for a conversation about mental health, you'd have a hard time selling that to the people who probably benefit most from being there. But if you said, "Hey, come over, let's have some dumplings and learn about dumplings and enjoy all that yummy food and also talk about mental health," like we're simple creatures. It is
I mean, I feel like I haven't met a single person who doesn't like some variation of dumpling. It's a delicious, like I said before, a delicious thing wrapped inside of a carb. Every culture has their version of it. Like I think, like I think a lot of people talk about like their culture's dumpling, quote unquote.
yeah.
And for me, it's just like it's the easiest way to get people to do things or hang out because like no one's gonna say no, I hate dumplings. I've never met a person that says that.
And so it's easy for somebody even in their own head to say dumplings, sure,
Mhm.
yes, of course. And by the way, I also get to talk about this thing that maybe I want to talk about but I don't want to admit that I want to talk about, or is a little bit provocative. So that's great. So there is a kind of a new take that you're taking on this, and you're
Yeah.
you're starting to get ready to spread the word.
Absolutely. Yeah. So actually, literally just 2 days ago, I finished the touches of like kind of putting together the framework of it, the party full invites and everything. I'm about to start advertising it on social media and like kind of my network, my channels, and everything. So I think it'll be exciting. It's unfortunately because it's dumpling making, it's like a little smaller. I would love it to be like more people, but it's gonna be more intimate, especially with discussions like this. So I'm trying to see how often I can hold them and everything. But the first one is at the end of the month. I'm pretty excited for it, end of August.
Great. Well, yeah, you definitely keep me in the loop so I can update this with the link for anybody who tunes in once it's live. But in terms of the role that this program plays, you're continuing to do this. It sounds like there was kind of a component of it that had kind of a professional side where corporate team building opportunities.
Mhm.
What are your kind of intentions, or what does success look like, or even sustainability look like for you going forward?
I think of this less about like how sustainable it is as a business because a lot of times if I make any profit at all, pretty much every one I've donated to some sort of org that's in the API space, especially during the pandemic, kind of doing all that. So for me, because I'm lucky enough to have like a 9 to 5, like I work, as in tech, right? So having that to sustain this side part of it, I don't think about sustainability as like, can I keep this business running? It's as long as I feel like I have the drive and the things that I care about and the what I want to be doing with it, as long as that fire still stays alive, then I want to keep doing this with whatever iteration it is, right? Because before, I was purely about bringing people together and having that community aspect, and that's something you talked about as I think your podcast talks about. It's like how do you belong in a community? And I thought a lot about that, right? And now the second aspect of it is like, how do I create this community, but also add this layer of like my things that I care about, which is, my Chinese heritage, but then also kind of this vulnerability, kindness. I call it a soft boy summer right now is what it is. So it's just like, how do you embrace that level of vulnerability and kindness and things in a way that is like meaningful and kind of sustaining for me. So in terms of success, as long as people come hang out, they tell me they have a good time, they shed the word, they learn something about the culture, they learn something about themselves. Like that's really all I care about in terms of like what is successful. Yeah.
That's amazing, and I feel like it's it's great to have realistic expectations around what it is that you're trying to do, realistic boundaries, because it can become a very time and energy consuming thing if you let it. But
Mhm.
if you maintain those boundaries, you say I'm doing this because I want to, and I'm going to keep doing it until I don't want to anymore, and then it's okay if I stop doing it at that point. Makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
It's a lot. It's fun as long as it stays fun for me. That's really I find a lot of joy in hosting and kind of, I guess it's cliche saying like bringing people together, but I kind
Yeah.
of like bring people together around kind of things that I care about, and hopefully my moral compass is like a good one that is like good things that people want to do that I want to do that people also want to do. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's a really enriching thing if you're doing something that feels good to you. It's in alignment with something you care about,
Hmm.
and it also involves bringing people together, and then those people get value out of the experience just by virtue of being there, having the yummy food, being around interesting people,
Yeah.
and people are grateful to the people who bring them together.
Hmm.
So just getting people into a room, connecting them to each other, people will remember who connected them to if they make a meaningful connection through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just lots of goodwill, lots of good energy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So you mentioned donating to some charitable organizations.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what those are?
Yeah. So, like I said, during the pandemic, there was a rise in a lot of API hate, but also there was essentially just it kind of showcased that like Chinatown really does have so much like local in person and kind of like community goodness within it that it was so hard when a pandemic hit that no one could make a living, no one could kind of feed themselves or anything because like just like the big part of it is people visiting and people going to the shops and going to eat the food there or
Mm.
having patrons to it. So a lot of the organizations that I support now are both supporting uplifting the API community and spreading awareness to the things that particularly New York City Chinatown faces, and then kind of supporting the businesses and the that are there to like keep being successful. So to name a few, I've done fundraisers for Send Chinatown Love is one of the very first ones that came out during the pandemic, I believe, that really spotlighted the stores that are in Chinatown that needed help or that were doing great things. And it also often kind of gives you the ones that aren't just like the super popular ones, right? It gives you like here's a Hmong place, right? Here's a Burmese restaurant. Here's this tailor that's been here for 100 years. Here's the only store in Chinatown that actually still hand makes their own mahjong tiles. Like
What?
there's like stuff like that that no one really knows about, and this organization has been doing awesome stuff to spotlight that. They actually, I believe, they're coming out with a cookbook that you can pre-order. I just saw it on Instagram that spotlights a bunch of Chinatown classic like restaurants and like their classic meals. So like I think that's
Mm.
yeah, I think people supporting Chinatown like financially just going to there and spending money there is a way to keep Chinatown alive, right? Because that's it. They like it's store owners, it's the restaurants, it's those things. Um, Another one that I absolutely love, I volunteer with them actually for the last year, is one called Heart of Dinner. And that's like really near and dear to my heart. Essentially, what they are is food insecurity. Essentially, they provide hot meals and grocery delivery service to elderly Asian families who don't have access to groceries or don't have easy access to groceries. So every week we'd go and we'd pack meals, we'd pack everything together, and depending on which location you're on, you're actually kind of taking the meals door to door to these families. Or
Mm.
there's a car service that will come and deliver it to further off locations. And like it's situated in areas that have a higher Chinese or just broader Asian population. But they're doing absolutely amazing work. And I think one thing that makes them stand out is that the bags that they deliver them in, they're always decorated. So they have volunteers and people from all over the world actually just decorating these bags. And it's kind of a way to, and it kind of always has a message in the language of the recipients.
Mm.
Hey, we're thinking of you. Hey, have a great day. Hope you're smiling. Hope you're happy. And we have actually heard of our recipients, the elderly families. They actually keep all of them, and they have like a stack of like 100 bags of all the bags they've received from the deliveries because they think it's like, unfortunately, a lot of the elderly Asian populations, they don't have too many family, or maybe they don't know too many people to visit them. So these visits, and these like 10, 15-second conversations in a hall. Here's your meals. How's you doing? You're safe today. Like, weather's hot. Like, hope you're staying cool. That means a lot to them. Plus then having this bag with like their language and kind of that is a thing. So I absolutely love this organization. And like I said, I've been volunteering with them for the last year. And it's another place where I would, that I donated the proceeds from any of these like events that I host.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, the first of all, sending some support to these organizations and just raising the awareness. I definitely want to get those links so that we can direct folks to them. But what great examples! So we could really unpack both of these a little bit. First of all, the value of even just a short conversation to somebody who might otherwise not talk to another human all day,
Mm-hmm.
and that little bit can really make all of the difference in terms of just nourishing somebody's social plants, and the imbuing of the energy and meaning into something as simple as a bag,
Mm-hmm.
that you're delivering this food in a bag. We're used to thinking of food, bags that transport food as being things that we dispose of or that take up too much space in our closet until we throw them all out. And the fact that there's this added layer of personal intention that's added to it, some creativity, some positivity, some sense of care, that somebody bothered to make this bag a little more pleasant and a little more special for this person, for these people, that they recognize and receive that energy enough that they want to keep the bag.
Yep. It's really sweet. I absolutely love it. And I remember one time I went to a family that was living a meal to, and they actually tried to invite me in to play mahjong with them. And I was like, I don't think I can. I don't know what the rules are around this. I absolutely love mahjong. It's actually one of my other side hustles or side businesses. Is I teach mahjong lessons. But then I was like, I want to play, but I don't think I can with this. I'm not sure like what the rules are, but it was just like, it's so sweet. It's you just make these little mini connections, and if you go week after week after week, they start getting more comfortable with you, and that's really it.
That's amazing. And we're going to come back to mahjong in a second, but I also want to talk about the first organization you mentioned, which, I lived in New York for many years. I've been to Chinatown many times, love Chinatown. And I did not know about a lot of the things you just mentioned.
Mhm.
And I find it very interesting that we have this kind of counter narrative. There's like, retail is in trouble, and big box retail and online shopping and all these things. And amidst all of that, probably most of us can think of somewhere in the nearest city where there's a little storefront that's been around for a million years,
Mhm.
that does one or two things, and it's like one person that works the store. And I
Mhm.
feel like those places are so rich with stories.
Yeah.
Like I would love to hear the story of the one shop in Chinatown that hand makes mahjong tiles. Like
Mhm.
that's got to be an incredible story.
This guy, I don't actually know much about the story. I remember seeing the story on the Sun Chinatown Love, and it's just I want to again I want to meet this guy. He sounds so cool. I believe he's from Hong Kong. At least he's Cantonese. So like again, that's like the added layer of like how I can go like actually talk to him in his language, and I think
Yeah.
it's just like a really fun way just to kind of hear the stories of what like how did you sustain this? And, like you keep doing it, and it's just like you're how do I say this? You're preserving a craft that is just like been machined out now, but now you're like you if you get a set from this guy, like that's like I feel like that's like a piece of art.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a very special thing. I like the idea of organizations raising awareness of those amazing kind of local spots that, they're not going to be on social media. They're not going to be advertising heavily, but they've probably got incredible stories to tell that would make me want to go out of my way to go check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
So,
that's one of the things that the Sen Chantal Love that's actually they worked with these organizations to create an online presence, a digital presence, because they don't know how.
mm,
So that's actually one of the services that they do offer for these orgs too, or for these
yeah,
businesses.
yeah, certainly. I mean, even just to get the basics of, get them on Google Maps, get them, at least like a toe in the water of the digital presence so people can find them. But then that extra layer of storytelling
Mm-hmm.
that really can make it so compelling. So, mahjong,
Yeah.
I don't know if I've played it. I feel like if I have, it's been a long time ago. Did I hear that a mutual friend of ours that you were teaching her mom? Was that something coaching her mom?
Do you know the folks at Leland?
No.
Leland, okay. Um, oh, I never talked about. Yeah, yeah. So okay, so over the last like I guess 2 3 years, I've kind of seen mahjong pop up in like the social scene where it's actually cool amongst I say not elderly Asian people. Because I played at home with my grandma who yells at me for like doing any wrong thing because she's the expert and I was a noob, right? And that's kind of my memory of mahjong is I would be sitting off to the side or like watching as my parents and grandparents would play, and they'd be like, "No, this is gambling. Like you shouldn't learn how to play." But I'd hear the clacking of the tiles, which is like one of the most iconic noises.
Mm.
Um, and for me to see that as like coming into like pseudo mainstream has been such a cool thing. There's a few organizations actually that are actually social clubs, which I actually volunteer at one of them to teach mahjong with them. They're called Green Tile Society. Um, but essentially, it's now like this cool thing that people do. So I've been also doing that on a side, hosting mahjong lessons, both my friends and also at this restaurant called Leland in Prospect Heights. But it's like kind of these private little mahjong classes, and it's just again another fun way for me to share my culture and things that I love to people. I think that's just kind of like a theme of the things that I've been doing.
Yeah, the supreme simplicity principle seems to hold true that you've got people like food, and people like games.
Yeah, absolutely. Tapping
Simple.
check. Yeah, the core nature of people.
Yeah. I had a friend of mine on this program a little while just recently who builds playgrounds, designs playgrounds, and she was talking about how children learn how to relate to each other through play. That they learn about kind of how to like set rules and respect each other's boundaries, and just this idea of like we have to agree on a common way of doing things, and that kind of builds up their capacity for understanding how the world works. And so it's cool to see that. And I feel like there are parks in the city where there are people who are just playing these games all day when the weather's good.
Yeah, so in Chinatown, you'll see a lot of the more elderly folks usually in parks, and they're playing either a game called Big Two, which is a card game, or Chinese checker or Chinese chess. Mahjong, I don't think usually is played out in the parks as much. I see it more uh, if you go into some of these Chinatown organizations, they actually have like mahjong halls and stuff that you can just go that their members can go and play in. So a lot of times it's more indoor kind of thing. But it's again, like I said, it's kind of blowing up. And the more I get into it, the more I learn about it. It's I learned the Hong Kong Canto style, but there's so many different styles of mahjong which have like a similar base set of rules, but all variations. There's Japanese, there's Shanghai, there's Taiwanese, there's Canto, which is why I am. There's actually, I learned about this. There's Jewish mahjong, which is the coolest thing ever to me. That the Jewish population, they, I guess, my thought is that there's this like mutual not celebrating of Christmas where they come together, and a big stereotype is Jewish people will have Chinese food and movies during Christmas, right? And my
Yeah.
thought is like maybe that's also how mahjong spread over too, because a lot of my Jewish friends, they're saying, hey, my grandma and my mom, they're all in like these mahjong leagues, and there's this whole other world that I do not understand, and I really want to figure out like how that happened. Apparently, every year there is a council that decides on the Jewish mahjong rules for that year. And I'm just, this is wild to me.
I could just picture those board meetings where the council's discussing these things and people are like slamming the table, like, no, no, the rules must be this way.
Yeah.
It's like the passion that comes up.
I'm pretty sure that also in Jewish mahjong, they use the Chinese mahjong tiles too, though. They don't have different sets. So it's like Chinese characters that they're all just like playing with. And I think it's the coolest thing that this game has kind of spread into different cultures.
I'm truly wondering if there is some kind of a Christmas Day magical cultural fusion of Jewish and Chinese energies that just comes together, and somehow mahjong kind of emerged from that.
I cannot. I think it's got to be like a fascinating story of how that happened. I really need to figure that out.
Yeah, somewhere further back, there's some stories to be told, I'm sure.
Right.
So all these different kinds of games, and I feel like this is something that I feel like there's something going on as far as games, accessible games. Maybe it's just kind of the ebb and flow of life that certain games become popular for who knows what reason, but like pickleball suddenly became a gigantic thing.
Right.
And I remember I played pickleball in high school, 20 something years ago. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking, oh, this is a really fun kind of take on in between ping pong and tennis. But I never heard of it again until a few years ago. And all of a sudden it's a big deal. And now, cornhole is a competitive thing now. My wife and I were in a restaurant the other day, and there was like ESPN 2 or whatever it was, and they had cornhole championships on the TV, and we were sucked into it watching these people. I wonder if I don't know if there's any, I don't know if it's like a real thing that's going on or if it's just the ebb and flow of time, but I find it interesting, especially that these are accessible
Yeah.
games, that these are things that anybody can kind of learn and play.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know,
It's
but I like
barrier,
it.
yeah, barrier of entry, but I think it's also all of those games to me have a communal aspect to it. Whereas like if you play traditional sports, like basketball or whatever, it's very competitive. It's very like butting heads and all that. But like mahjong, you're sitting around a table, you're just chatting with each other. You're just like talking about your day or whatever it is. Cornhole, it seems like there's a lot more socialness to this.
Yeah.
Pickleball, also like you're in a smaller court, you're able to talk and everything. So I feel like a lot of these have come from this thing that like we just want to be social. Or that's just kind of the way I justify it all.
I love it. I hadn't put that together. I think that's such an interesting hypothesis, regardless of if it's true or not. It's like, it's an interesting thing to wonder on are we feeling a stronger desire to do stuff where we could just hang out and talk and be closer together?
Yeah.
I'm a fan. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about where you're headed. I know you said you've got some new programs coming up. Anything else that's on your mind as far as, as you're going to approach this new iteration of what you're doing? Anything you're going to, do differently, or anything you're particularly excited about?
I think one thing that I've learned is as I've gone with all these different events, hosting them and moderating is such like an art form that I've tried to get better and better at. So I think that's something I need to keep thinking through as I'm doing this. I've been to a few more of these like kind of smaller, these smaller events where it's like themed around a certain idea. There's something called Storytell NYC, which my friend which actually I believe we have a mutual friend who does it. There's like a way in which you can moderate and host to make people feel as comfortable as possible. I think this book that I read called The Art of Gathering is actually one of the greatest Bibles, I guess, for people who love hosting that I'm trying to learn from. So I think that's the biggest thing is like, how do I facilitate these events? Oh, you have a copy? Yes. I've
Keep
lent
it
my
close
house
to me.
right now, but it is my absolute favorite book when it comes to just like learning how to be a better moderator, a better host, and that's the thing I'm gonna take into this new, I guess, venture of mine is because it's gonna be both facilitating like a cooking class, but also a
Mm.
conversation. And how do I do that in a way that makes people feel the most comfortable that they can be vulnerable if they want to, right? That kind of I want to be able to create that environment for people and kind of have like a good experience and be able to take something away out of it. So
Was there kind of one particular takeaway from that book that you're really excited to kind of apply going forward now?
I think one thing I think about is like having an end time. There was a section in that book where it talks about having a specific start time is great, but having an end time where people know that this is like the culmination of a thing, and now we're done, and now we can take it to the next location if we want to, or we can kind
Yeah.
of have this a way for you to communicate outside of this event. Because the ambiguousness leads people to like awkward, like, hey, I kind of want to leave, but I don't want to leave, but I don't want to make everyone else feel they're leaving. That kind of shuffle has happened to me in a lot of in other events. So that's one thing I've picked up that I want to be a little more mindful with. This is like, hey, this event is this time, and then if we want to continue the conversation, like have some way of doing that. But that's
Yeah.
one I've taken from that book.
Yeah, I feel like Priya Parker's messaging in that talks a lot about the role of the host being one of being assertive about the leadership role you take on
Mm-hmm.
in creating the container for this conversation, for this meeting, and being very clear about what that means, what the expectations are, and that extends to the ending of it. And as you said, it doesn't mean that people have to stop talking or hanging out, but that there's a clear sense of, okay, the program you came here for is complete. You are now free to go. And if something else comes of it after that, informally, great, cool, not
Mm-hmm.
really, not something that we're going to set expectations around. And I think that's super handy. The first meetup that I went to in New York City when I didn't know anybody in New York was what it had a clear ending, and then there was a group of people that wanted to keep hanging out, and so we went to a bar, and then some people peeled away, and then we went to another bar. I was in my early 20s, so and then like we went to like a third bar, and by that point there was like three of us, and we became really good friends.
Absolutely.
And after that meetup, I had friends in New York City, and it set me on a whole, I ended up becoming a meetup organizer myself and all those things. But sometimes there's a lot of value in getting people excited and having a good experience, and then kicking them out the door and letting them figure out what to do next.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things in that book that I wanna keep. I actually need to reread it again because it's just like so many nuggets of usefulness in there that I wanna take. So I think
Yeah.
that's what I'll be thinking about as I go into this next phase.
All right. So let's talk recipe. We, unsurprisingly, we have a dumpling recipe. You want to talk to me about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that I've just essentially iterated over the last, I don't know, like 7, 8, 9, 10 years. I don't know how long it's been since I started making dumplings. It's like a take on a like a classic Chinese dumpling recipe, but it's from my aunt. I learned a lot about how because she actually was a restaurant owner, my aunt and my uncle. So I learned a lot more tricks about like authentic Chinese cooking. So in my recipe, I have the classics. Soy sauce. There's sesame oil. There's white pepper powder. There's ginger, garlic, and stuff like that. But something I've heard not as many people use is oyster sauce, which adds a level
Mm.
of umaminess and savoriness to the dish, to meat. And from my family's cooking, like oyster sauce is such a very prominent way to make meats more flavorful, and it kind of brings out a lot of savoriness to it. And then for my meats, I actually don't just use like straight fatty meat, ground pork. I don't use but I don't want to do super lean either. So I love just like the mix of the two. So like a nice, it's actually probably more than 80-20, but having more fattiness in it leads is more juiciness, leads to a little bit more flavor to me. My aunt tells me I shouldn't because that's like not healthy, but I'm like, I'm eating dumplings. It's not the healthiest. It's not bad for you, but yeah, so basically that's just been iterating. I learned it from my family, from my aunt, and then as I've gone along, I just kind of tweaked it a little bit. There was this one dumpling restaurant in Chinatown that closed down, unfortunately, during the pandemic, and that was widely regarded as like the best dumpling in the city. And try as I might, I cannot get my recipe to match theirs. I don't know what they do or how they do it, but that will always be the gold, the North Star for me of trying to tweak my recipe.
Okay, well, I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like I would have kicked myself if I didn't ask. What's your number one in New York right now,
That's hard.
or just one that comes to mind, a personal favorite?
So I'll give you three. I'll say that.
Okay, we'll narrow it down to three. Yeah,
Dumpling, Super Taste, and King Dumpling are the three that I've enjoyed recently, and they're all in Chinatown. They're all just like hole in the wall mom and pop restaurants that serve mostly dumplings, and those are the three that I've really enjoyed so far.
absolutely amazing. Okay, and while we're giving plugs and shouts, let's wrap it up. Where do people find you and what you're working on the
Yeah.
internet?
I'm on Instagram. It's at len3689, len3689. But also for my dumpling stuff, it's at Dumpling Dude NYC. It's also a website, but I haven't touched that in a while. It's kind of it's dumplingdudenyc.com, but I haven't really updated that a little bit. But I think now that I have this new thing going on, that'll probably be the next place where I get. But Instagram is the best way to stay connected with me.
Amazing. This has been such a fun conversation, Lenny, and I hope I can partake of a future dumpling conversation. And thanks for coming to hang with me.
Absolutely. Had a blast. Thanks, Tony.
All right.